It's Wild World episode 3 and it has definitely been a bit of a wet week, but it has also been National Gardening Week and today marks International Dawn Chorus Day. So a lot of excuses to get outside and to be excited about nature regardless of the weather. As it is the peak of the Dawn Chorus at the moment, there is a bit of a focus on birds for this week's episode, but before that we're going to head straight to our badger set in Gloucester following Billy's exciting announcement last week that there are a few new members of the family.
So in last week's episode, I teased you with a couple of clips from my recently expanded badger family. And I tell you what, I can't even begin to express how excited I am to be able to watch these cubs grow up over the next few weeks. Now, as well as discovering these new additions, I've also observed a little bit of family drama taking place over at the badger set. And the other week, I recorded this. A slight scuffle between two badgers. Now, after conferring with a good nature nerd friend of mine and a mammal mastermind, Mr. Peter Cooper, we think that this is an adult and a 2-year-old from a previous litter. Now, interestingly, a few days later, the 2-year-old returned to the set bleeding with a great big gash in its ear, which I can only assume is the result of another tussle between the badgers, and it's earned her the nickname of Scraggy. But why is Scraggy still hanging around? Well, it can actually be quite hard to pinpoint which female is the mother, as non-breeding females will often help take care of the clan's cubs, and in this instance, I actually have shots of both Scraggy and another female which I've nicknamed Tufty, showing maternal behaviours towards the cubs. And in badger society, many helpers are actually females that haven't been able to reproduce by themselves due to resource competition. And though we can't be certain, we're pretty sure that Tufty is most likely to be the mother and that Scraggy is a helper female. I also want to show you a few clips which I've recorded of the badger's slightly more cunning neighbours, the foxes. Over the past few weeks, I've seen quite a bit of activity from a couple of vixens, and a particular highlight of mine was this. At first, I wasn't sure if the fox was chasing a mouse or a rat. So once again, I've conferred with Mr. Cooper, and we're pretty sure that that was a wood or a yellow-necked mouse. Before I wrap up, let's have one more look at the badger cubs. So right now, they're probably about 10 to 14 weeks old, weighing somewhere around 1 to 3 kilos. And we definitely have one cub that's tipping the scales a little bit. Just look at this one, he's a right old chunky monkey. That's all from me this week, but don't worry, I'll be keeping a very close eye on what those cubs are getting up to, and I'll be updating you again next week.
We'll be back to check in with our badger family soon, but for now we're heading further north to Cheshire, where wildlife cameraman Ben Harris is set up and ready to capture the bird action in his garden.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm in Cheshire today, just outside of Manchester, and I'm going to be trying to film some of the UK's most common bird species. Now, we're really lucky here in the UK to have some incredible diversity, even in the average UK garden, and that is exactly where I'm going to start. I love bird watching in the garden because it's one of the most easily accessible ways we can see wildlife here in the UK, and it's not quite happening for me at the moment. There's lots of things going on, so the neighbours are doing a bit of garden work and building work, and my parents' house where I'm staying right now, they have 2 cats, and none of these things are really conducive with getting birds into the garden because they're a bit worried about predation. And if it doesn't work on the day, what you can do is go and hedge your bets and try something else. So I'm going to go out for my daily exercise walk and see if I can't spot anything while I'm doing that. So just as I was walking down the road, I was lucky enough to spot this buzzard soaring over some of the fields. I really love buzzards. They're the UK's most common bird of prey, but it's the biggest bird that you'll probably see outside of Scotland, and it has this beautiful soaring action as it goes over the fields, and spring is a really, really good time to see them. But buzzards were not always really common, so they've had 2 population crashes. One back in World War II when people persecuted them because they thought the buzzards were hunting their game, right? So the buzzards were taking pheasants and rabbits and whatnot, so they basically just killed them all off. And then the populations built and built and built again until the 1960s and 70s, and we had the DDT incident with all the pesticides. And so as the pesticides passed up the trophic levels, these toxins would accumulate and the population crashed again. But now we're on record high numbers. Buzzards are now in every county in the UK, and it's amazing seeing them flying over this rural setting of the great green fields, especially in the evening light.
Certain sightings of species can become such commonplace that we begin to overlook how special it might be to see that species thriving in the wild. And now it's time for our weekly birdsong lesson with the lovely Lucy.
We're back with your third birdsong of the week. Now today's songster is again a really familiar garden resident, although it might be one that you don't actually see that often. It's one of the smallest birds we have in Britain, and yet it holds one of the loudest voices. It is, of course, the wren. Now when we're learning a wren song, there's two things you've got to remember. The first one is that volume I mentioned. It really is a loud song. It actually holds the crown title of having the most decibels per gram of any British bird. So that gives you an idea of just how loud we're talking. You might hear it burst into song from the undergrowth. You can't see it, but you can definitely hear it. And if you're very close, it can even hurt your ears a little bit. The second thing to remember is an image. When that wren bursts into song, I want you to imagine that it's a little tiny wind-up toy. You've wound it up and you've wound it up and you've set it down and you've let it go. It bursts into that song. And because that song is so loud that after all of those little notes and melodic bits, it loses control and it starts to vibrate. And that vibrate comes out as a little rattle. The rattle is the key point of that song that you need to identify. So when you listen to it, listen out for that whir, that rattle, and you'll know you're dealing with a wren. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed again learning a new bird song of the week. Join me next week for another one.
Even if you can't necessarily identify individual bird songs, often there is still a particular sound that can be incredibly nostalgic. We now join Gillian, who has a surprising story to tell about a seabird whose call is synonymous with the seaside.
This is what I see from my attic window. And over the last few weeks, it's occurred to me that this is the soundtrack to my life in the UK. Since I moved here many moons ago as a young adult to do my biology degree in Bristol. And ever since, I've always lived in towns and cities where gulls are a real feature. I don't know if it's because I didn't grow up here, but the first time I saw a herring gull, I was blown away. It was quite an exotic looking bird. It was big for one, but they're beautiful birds as well when you really stop and take a look at them. The adult plumage in this bright white feathers and slate grey backs and wings. But probably the most evocative thing about these birds is the sounds that they make. For many people, the cry of the seagull is the sound of the seaside. It leaves people misty-eyed, unless of course you have one nesting on your roof, in which case they make for really noisy neighbours. And this is part of the problem, because herring gulls have become really good at living with us, in amongst us, alongside us. And they make the most of the waste that we leave behind. And people have started to think of them as vermin. So would it surprise you if I told you that this is a species that's on the red list, which means it's a species of highest conservation concern? That's because populations in their natural habitats are plummeting. They may appear to be doing well in urban environments, but their natural habitats, they're really struggling. And, you know, I know that they're noisy. And yes, I know they're messy and they have unpleasant habits and they can be really antisocial and they steal our food and they dive bomb us. But you know what? Try living alongside lions and elephants, because, you know, they can be pretty antisocial too. Yet, we don't value this species that's right on our doorstep, but it's also on the red list. Maybe we need to flip this story on its head and look at it from a bird's eye perspective, that we have encroached on their habitat, that we can be pretty antisocial and we have pretty messy habits too, that we have created heat islands in the form of our cities and our towns that have drawn these birds away from their natural habitats, that we have created the perfect ready-made cliffs in the form of our rooftops, which are safe from ground predators. You know, I would challenge that if you saw this same bird soaring somewhere out over the Southern Ocean, it would take your breath away. With all the time that we have to reflect, maybe we need to take some time to really consider that this is a species that's struggling. And maybe we need to respect their resourcefulness and let them carry our imaginations away out to sea.
It just goes to show that despite a species seeming abundant, they could actually be in real trouble. So don't forget to consider that next time you hear the call of a herring gull. Thank you so much for sending in your pictures and clips. We've had some amazing photos of your ponds in pots and just general doorstep discoveries. It's amazing to see nature bringing so much joy to people at this very strange time. But for now, keep safe, keep well, and we'll see you next Sunday.